the first time in the country's 200-year history, Mexico has elected a female president. Claudia Sheinbaum is Mexico's projected presidential winner and will succeed President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Sheinbaum is a climate scientist and former Mexico City mayor, also the first person from a Jewish background to lead the overwhelmingly Catholic country.
The new Mexican president will play a vital role in the country's relationship with the U.S., including progress toward limiting migrant crossings and cross-border drug trade. Per government statistics, U.S. Border Patrol encountered 250,000 migrants crossing into the U.S. from Mexico in December 2023. Mexico also became the U.S.'s top trading partner in the year 2023, surpassing China and Canada per CNN. To break all of this down, we have Rafael Bernal, a staff writer at The Hill. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's great to have your expertise with us. So tell us more about this figure who is now going to be the president of Mexico and what her placement is in the political world relative to the to the previous administration.
Well, the most interesting thing about Claudia Sheinbaum is we know who she's been politically. She's been a mentee of López Obrador. We don't know who she will be as president. There are many questions. There's some contradictions in her background. She is a climate scientist. So she's a big environmentalist. Her biggest infrastructure policy was a continuation of López Obrador's own infrastructure policy in Mexico City, which was building more highways, and she's leaned into this. So there are real doubts. She's as a character, she had a very pretty much communist upbringing with close relations with Cuba. It's said that she spent her summers as a kid going to communist Cuba at the time, which at the time in Mexico was not well perceived by a majority of people, but there was a subset of communist sympathizers, and it was at the time it became legal after a while to be a communist in Mexico. So it's not the same feeling as it would have been here in the United States. I think that's important to say. She led this giant city that's had this cultural resurgence. It's become sort of a world capital. And even with those very left-leaning principles, there's been sort of a gentrification of downtown Mexico City with its pros and cons. So the big question remains is, she obviously ran on continuity because she ran on the party ticket of a very popular incumbent. It would have been political suicide not to run on continuity. But the question is out there, will the continuity include the good and the bad? Or, just picking one or the other from López Obrador's policies?
Yeah, I mean, I saw progressive former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis celebrating the win. He tweeted, "Congratulations to friend and fellow traveler Claudia Sheinbaum. Winning the presidency of Mexico is not just a confirmation of Andrés Manuel's policies in favor of the poor, but a giant leap for radical feminism and ecology, a rare glimmer of hope in a bleak era." And it's worth noting that she didn't just kind of squeak one out the way we're used to these days in American elections, but one with basically 59% of the vote. To what do you attribute her victory, especially if there are kind of familiar sentiments, familiar as what we kind of expect and are familiar with in America, that about kind of Red Scare and criticism of left politics and the vilification of communism and things like that?
This kind of landslide is actually very familiar to any Mexican, probably over the age of 40, certainly over the age of 50. It's what the Mexicans call an election of state, meaning the Mexican state. There was a lot of intervention by López Obrador at times, potentially illegal. Obviously, he wasn't judicially reprimanded for commenting on the election. While there are very strict laws on what a sitting president can say, it's a party, he's created a party that in many ways reflects the hegemonic party that led Mexico for 70 years in the 20th century, and that very reluctantly let go of power in a very democratic election. So it sort of ended well in the year 2000, but since the year 2000, that Mexican democracy has been losing steam. It's an election where the official party, what they call in Mexico, operated the election, which is sort of it's sort of a combination of get out the vote and voter coercion that's very unique to Mexican politics. And they called it. They said this is going to be a 2-to-1 margin. And yes, a lot of polls did reflect that, but polling in Mexico is widely inaccurate. And you know what the party said, the polls that the party commissioned, and the end result are all the same. But that does not take away, and this is important because there's a lot of suspicion, there's a lot of processes that remind us of the hegemonic PRI of the 20th century, but the social programs put in by Morena, the López Obrador's party, are enormously popular, and they have made a dent in Mexico's poverty cycle just through direct cash transfers. So there's a bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's not a wild triumph of absolute democracy, zero corruption, everything's going to be fine from now on. There are definitely major concerns and many major concerns in the bilateral relationship, not just on migration, but on sort of bubbling trade disputes between the United States and Mexico.
There's also some question and some interest in whether or not she is going to sort of be a continuation of AMLO's sympathetic posture toward Gaza, the Palestinians, in the wake of the siege on Gaza. Previously, Obrador, he declined to call it a genocide, but then did say that Mexico wanted to join South Africa's petition at the ICJ. And people have been looking into Sheinbaum's past and found that back in 2009, she wrote that, quote, "Because of my Jewish origin, because of my love for Mexico, and because I feel like a citizen of the world, I share with millions the desire for justice, equality, fraternity, and peace, and therefore I can only see with horror the image of the state bombings. No reason justifies the murder of Palestinian civilians. Nothing can justify the murder of a child." When you said earlier there was some question about whether or not the person that she has been previously in her political career will be the person that she is as president, was her stance on the humanitarian crisis in Palestine and the longstanding fight for statehood a part of that?
It would be absolutely shocking. This would be the most massive surprise if she were to turn on AMLO and his international alliances. I fully expect her to continue AMLO's position on Gaza for sure, maybe even joining South Africa. Many even expect her to radicalize a little bit in that because AMLO's history was with the hegemonic party, which was ideologically very fluid, and AMLO has been ideologically very fluid. Claudia Sheinbaum is not known to be very ideologically fluid. She is known to be hard left in a global sense. So I mean, a left that would be off the scales here in the United States, maybe far to the left of Bernie Sanders, kind of, which puts her in a pretty good company globally. But all that to say, it would be very, very, very surprising if she, not only Gaza, if she doesn't continue very close relationships with communist Cuba, with Nicolás Maduro's regime in Venezuela, and possibly with the Nicaraguan regime, although the human rights violations might scare even the most ideological allies away. But she's definitely not going to lead her foreign policy with an ideological rapprochement with the United States. That would be incredibly surprising.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, how you predict the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico to develop with immigration, illegal border crossings being such a pivotal issue, becoming one of the top 2 or 3 issues in our own upcoming U.S. presidential election. So much pressure being put on Biden. Biden offering a very serious border deal that then Republicans rejected as not even being tough enough. Many Democrats are actually upset that they offered that much. This kind of thing is very important to the American political discourse. So how does having a new president in Mexico affect that?
I mean, the Biden administration can only hope for continuity. López Obrador has very transactionally imported U.S. human rights violations at the border and just made them his own. He's deported. It's not really deported, but relocated tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals from Mexico's northern border back to Mexico's southern border when they don't have the capability to actually deport them to their home countries. He's used the security apparatus of the Mexican state more to keep migrant numbers down for President Biden. And what the question is, obviously, they know that keeping those numbers down is some favors Biden ahead of November. Sheinbaum takes office on October 1st. So 2 questions: whether they'll be able to continue this policy, because it's not sustainable just moving people back. If the numbers of migrants within Mexico keep increasing, at some point, the dam breaks. And the other question is whether they want to, whether Morena, that's a populist, very populist party that's going to have a constitutional majority in Mexican Congress. That's not. It's not a traditional Democratic Party. It fits better in the 21st century among the populist nationalists than it does among sort of the traditionalist liberal Democrats, small d. So what do they want out of the U.S. election? And they know that, if on October 1st, suddenly we have 500,000 people crossing the border, that is obviously not very good for Biden. What can Biden offer them? It's a very, there are more questions than answers, but that exchange is going to be crucial over the next 6 months. But after November, the question is migration really going to be still that big of an issue without an election on top of us, regardless of who wins? And the U.S. and Mexico have the largest bilateral trading relationship on earth. Will the issues, the USMCA, potential USMCA issues on energy policy, on corn policy, things that Mexico has been accused of violating the USMCA, will those bubble up to real trade disputes between the 2 countries, and will the focus go there? Will security stay the focus? Will fentanyl stay the focus? It's a very complicated relationship.
Rafael, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.